What is going on, YouTube? This is Jim back with another video, and today I want to talk to you guys about my experience so far with Days Gone. Now, just a couple days ago, you guys hopefully saw me unbox the collector edition. I was highly impressed with the stuff that we got, and obviously the game was the highlight of that. I mean, and that's something that a lot of people, press-wise, isn't too keen on. And I felt like it was time to do a video to talk a little bit about one of my favorite genres, the zombie genre, particularly with how this game handles it and why I think this game is actually really, really good. And before I do that, I want to mention, if you guys like what you see, please consider commenting, rating, and subscribing. But with that, enough of that. Let's talk about this game. Now, I think to understand this game, you have to understand that the game that the press played is not the game that is in our hands. And I have no fault on the press at all. We have all been burned with patches, and day one patches and later patches that drastically changed the game, which is different than the copy that all the press reviewers got. And I understand that. And I think we could also agree that the games as a service model has really corrupted a lot of our thoughts. You look at games like Anthem or Destiny or the original Division that were supposed to be feature-rich games that were not, that over years and years of patching, hopefully in Anthem's case, will become a great game. And ultimately, we're something to be proud of. But think back to those early days, they weren't that great. Now, Days Gone is not as a games as a service. It's a single-player experience, which in of itself, I think, gets cool points because, remember, a few years ago, game developers were trying to tell us that single-player was dead. So good on the Bethesdas and the PlayStations of the world to keep that dream alive. Now, what we really have to look at is the patching and how different the game has become. Now, I've watched a lot of videos. I did not have a press copy, unfortunately, so I had to wait like everybody else to get my hands on it. But it seems a majority of the concerns that the press had during the version 1.02 patch were related to frame rate and related to buggy NPCs or buggy world interactions. And I could tell you guys that I have now logged close to 10 hours into this game, and I am on version 1.05. It just patched again this morning, as a matter of fact. And I have yet to see any of those hiccups at all on my PlayStation 4 Pro. As a matter of fact, the game runs beautifully and it looks wonderful. I think it's a showcase for HDR graphics on the PlayStation, definitely. I would rate it up against Sea of Thieves in terms of just how beautiful HDR can really make an experience. And I would challenge you to look at a video that doesn't have HDR and a video that does have HDR, of course on an HDR-enabled display, and I think you'll see what I mean for yourselves. So the game is definitely beautiful, and a lot of the graphical issues have been fixed. The question is, really, why was press so hard on it? Now, obviously, they did lose some points because of the graphical bugs, and again, those have been fixed, and NPCs did have some weird issues where they would talk over each other or whatever. I have yet to see that. Understand you would lose points for that, but I think the heart of the issue is, what do you want from a zombie game? Now, I am a huge fan of the zombie genre. I love The Walking Dead. I love all the old video games and books that relate to zombies, and I think it's a fascinating, fascinating subject. So I think to a game like, we'll start with Dead Island. Dead Island, I feel like, is very similar to Dead Rising in the sense that they were melee heavy based games. You weren't getting guns, you did get some guns, but it was limited. But it was really about, you know, limited durability weapons. In the heat of the moment, you run into a room, whether it be a mall or a tropical paradise, really empty-handed, and you're scavenging rapidly to find things. You're finding ores, or you're finding coffee cups, or you're finding bar stools, anything at all. And you're picking it up and you're throwing it at enemies, and it's very a frantic-based gameplay, heavily based on melee. You did get guns, but not many, and they were very limited bullets, very limited durability, and it really relied on you using good positioning to put yourself in a situation where you could funnel enemies and use melee to your advantage. And I love that about those games. Now, they did have a very silly side to them, obviously, with some of the weapon crafting, like the electric shopping cart or the boat paddle that has a chainsaw on the end, things like that. You know, you did have those goofy mechanics, but when you take some of that stuff aside and you try to ground it in reality, it did have a very good sense of reality to it, although it was really masked by a lot of the goofy, humorous moments. Particularly the stories were a little bizarre, and particularly some of the weapons were just a little too outlandish to be considered grounded in any sort of reality. So that makes a lot of sense, though, why people like those games so much. Then you look at an exact opposite game like that, and look at a game like Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2. Those games, the exact opposite. Melee really wasn't an option at all. They wanted you to use guns and shotguns and explosives and take out as many zombies as you could at once. Bust through the door, machine guns ablazing, run through levels as fast as possible, no stealth element at all, run and gun, shoot to kill, just hog wild. And that was actually a great idea too, and it was really a lot of fun, and Left 4 Dead 2 is still a very popular game. As a matter of fact, at the last LAN party we had, we played Left 4 Dead 2 almost all night and had an absolute blast with it. So there are places for both of those games, but I feel like if you really want to understand Days Gone, you have to really ground yourself more in the reality aspect of things. You have to look at a game and think, okay, this actually makes kind of, I mean, obviously the zombie thing, but it makes sense. It makes sense that when you're out scavenging in the world, you're going to have to be stealthy. You're not going to be able to take on 30 or 40 enemies at once via melee, just standing there swinging and, swinging your baseball bat left and right and taking 6 or 7 out at once. You're going to have to pick your engagements. So there's definitely a level of stealth element to it. But it's not just about you fighting the zombies. It's about you fighting the other survivors and pitting those two groups against each other, and pitting wildlife that did survive against those groups as well, and environmental things to your advantage. And that's, I think, really where Days Gone really does shine. So I just got done clearing out a camp of survivors that were nearby my base that were up to no good. And I say survivors, I mean they're bad guys and they needed to die, and they did die. There were a couple different ways I could have handled it. I could have run and gun, shooting, blowing everybody up. But the second you shoot a gun, the nearby zombie horde, well, freakers in this case, but it's really irrelevant, could run in and interfere. And you could have those two groups pit against each other. Or you could go all stealth, or a combination thereof, and use traps and some of the environmental areas to your advantage, hiding behind broken tree stumps or behind tents to try to whittle away at the enemy without them shooting at you. And I like that. I think that's a really cool idea. Now, the other thing that a lot of people were frustrated about with Days Gone was that the bike is something that's a little bit too much to upkeep. And I do agree in a sense that the bike does not really do very well in gasoline. You have to coast quite a bit to preserve gasoline, and it takes damage very rapidly via scrap. But all these games have to have some sort of sink to them. Diablo always had the infamous gold sink, which was basically anytime you died, it cost money to res, or you had to use money to upgrade or repair your armor via a damage durability count. So if the game is going to bombard you with resources and say, here's all the things, then there has to be a way for them to siphon that out in a meaningful way. Otherwise, you're going to become godlike very rapidly. And you look at games that don't have durability, that do have collectibles, and I'll use Assassin's Creed Odyssey as a perfect example. Very early on in that game, I realized that I could just basically slaughter and steal to my heart's content and slowly earn up money. There was really no sink, because every time I would level up and get a new level, I'd get new weapons, whatever. There was really no reason to upgrade my old gear. And by the time I got to building up my boat with resources, it took me maybe 30 minutes of mild grinding in the ocean sea to completely max out my boat 100%. And I'm talking maybe 3 hours into the game, everything I possibly could do was upgraded. And why was that? It was because there wasn't any good gold sinks in the game. Now, you might say, great, that's what I want. I want the best stuff in the game. But if you really feel like playing a game like that, then go play a computer game, get some console mods, and just give yourself all the guns and all the weapons. And then the game loses its meaning, right? So I feel like with Days Gone, they do put in a lot of barriers of things. You have to constantly go buy ammunition. You have to constantly craft things and scavenge and repair your bike and fuel your bike. but they do that because they're giving you tons and tons of stuff to scavenge if you want it. Now, if you're somebody who likes going story mission to story mission, you're probably not going to like this because you're going to have to detour to that old creepy house on the hill and crawl through, fighting your way through zombies in order to find a couple pieces of scrap or some gasoline to get your motorcycle going on to the next thing. And I totally get that. But for everybody else, I feel like this game was just perfectly designed for me, that has that nice level of stealth and survivability where your character is tough but not too tough, and where you have to really explore and understand the world in order to be successful in your missions, because your guy is not a tough guy by any stretch of the imagination. He will get overrun very, very rapidly. So you have to use your brain to your advantage, and you have to use the environment to your advantage. And I think that that's where this game really, really shines. So I want to say that for everybody out there who's just blindly hating on Days Gone, understand what you're getting into. This game is not meant for everybody. And I think that the game may have done itself somewhat of a disservice showing off those giant freaker hordes during their E3 demonstrations, because I think people may have thought that that was really the crux of the game. And it is absolutely, couldn't be farther from the truth. The reality is, there's going to be a lot of one-off, two-off zombies scattered around, and as you slowly start taking out their nests and they slowly start to, build up, that's when you're going to encounter some of those hordes. But, a lot of it is going to be the mundane kind of stuff of you scavenging around carefully, taking your time, picking up the gear that's necessary in order to advance the story, in order to build up your arsenal, build up your motorcycle, and I think that's really where the game shines. So with that, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys found some of this informative. I haven't really seen anybody talk about the game quite like this. It seems like a lot of people are just blindly in love with it or blindly hating it, but I think that this is a very niche genre of a survivability game and accountability where you really have to take your time, and I think a lot of people are missing that. And honestly, I think a lot of the press is missing that, and I think that's why they bashed it so bad. But I've done my good deed for the day. I've endorsed a game that I truly, truly love, and it's one that I will definitely sink many, many hours into. But I want to hear your comments below. Let me know what you guys think about Days Gone. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.